Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first Capital Markets Day for Oryx Petroleum. We have a fairly full agenda for the day. I'm just going to run you through that real quick. To start, we'll have our CEO, Mike Ebsary, will do an introduction and give some highlights of the year. Then Henry will take us through the Iraq operational review. At lunch, we have a guest speaker, a lady from Riva Bala from Stratfor, an organization specializing in geopolitics and security that will give a sort of a third-party perspective on the geopolitics in the areas that we operate. And then after lunch, we will have Henry will come back and give you an overview of what we're doing in West Africa and a bit of a preview of our reserves and resources and how those might evolve. Then Craig will come on and talk you through some of the financial aspects of our business, and then Mike will close.
Thank you, Scott. And if I can add my welcome to Scott's welcome to all of you to, as he said, Oryx Petroleum's first Capital Markets Day. And I appreciate the effort that a number of you have come from far and wide to get here, and some of you from Toronto who had to come out in the cold to get here. So much appreciated that you're with us. As Scott said, I'm going to walk you through just a brief history and reminder to most of you as to who is Oryx Petroleum and how we came about. And then I'm going to talk through achievements in 2013 and then give you a little bit of a taster on 2014, and then I'll let Henry and Craig develop that up in more detail. So again, just a background and history for Oryx Petroleum. We are the follow-on from a company called Petroleum, a quite successful Canadian-listed company with activities in many of the same countries that Oryx Petroleum is in. That company was taken over in 2009 by Sinopec, and basically we were all asked to stay on for an extra year, which we did. And so the senior management team who's presenting to you today, along with Jean-Claude Gondour, our chairman and major shareholder, stayed until near the end of 2010. And so we're basically a company that started going in 2011, both with the management team coming out of Adex Petroleum and the capital that Adex and Oryx Group was willing to redeploy into a new entity. And so over about a 3-year period, I think we can be pretty proud of what we've achieved. Within a 3-year time, we built up a team of some 100 people with bases in both Geneva, sizable bases in both Geneva and Erbil, Kurdistan. We've acquired 7 sizable assets. We've raised roughly $1 billion in capital, including that $700 million from AOG. And we've moved quickly into a position of having reserves, resources, and as we'll talk about quite soon, moving into a position of producing oil in Kurdistan. So we're quite proud of achievements to date over the last 3 years, and as I say, the last year has been a very successful one. But we're also extremely excited about where we're going, and that's a lot of what you'll hear about today. Strategy, again, this is a reminder for most of you. The focus, our company is focused on activities in Africa and the Middle East. Why are we there? I flip to the second bullet point first. A lot of us, both senior management, mid-level management, have experience of these regions, and importantly, Jean-Claude Gondour is very well known and has a very strong calling card throughout those regions. So it's the reason we've targeted that region. And we are people who go after known hydrocarbon basins. We are not virgin explorers. We do know what we like in the region. We know the countries we want to target on. We know the geology that interests us. One of the lessons we learned from Adex Petroleum was the importance of having a strong technical team, both in terms of allowing you to analyze any new venture acquisitions you're looking at, and to be able to operate and take a strong technical position. So we have repeated that. We brought some people across from Adex Petroleum, but we have recently employed quite a few others, all with very broad experience and good experience in the region, to put ourselves in the same position, to be able to be an operator and driver of our asset base. We are looking to build a full-cycle E&P company. That clearly means that we want to have production, we want to have exploration, we want to have assets and appraisal and development, and have the full cycle of activities for an E&P company. Clearly, cash flow is is crucial to us. Our previous company only raised money at the beginning and once for an acquisition and then lived off its cash flow. We'd like to get to the same position. Obviously, that's not yet, but we can certainly now start to see the path towards that occurring. We do take a disciplined approach to our management, financial management and acquisitions, and I'll talk a little bit more on acquisitions. It's not something in today's presentation we're focusing on, but I'll talk about that on a later slide briefly. So 2013, as I said, a very busy, very successful year. We started off the year with completing the test on the Demerdag field, which allowed us to recognize and book the Demerdag field as a field of some 500 million barrels of 2P reserves and 2C resources, and clearly that's something we look forward to making it grow further. We completed the IPO in May, and then really picked up activity in the second half of the year, and that's through two main reasons. One is we started to get fully rigged up in Kurdistan. We now have 3 rigs going full-time, and that's allowed us to drill more of these wells as we've gone along. And in Congo, obviously getting drilling going there with our partners in country. And on top of that, we've started to get very much into the production game, signing a deal for an early production facility that is advancing apace and obviously will position us next year to start producing. Now we move to a slide we've called our report card, and this is really to talk about what we told people we're going to do in the IPO and what we've actually done. There's been some debate whether or not we should call it a report card because report cards generally don't have check marks and X's, and I have teenage kids and they tell me that they normally have C's and D's in these types of columns instead. But we've called it that, and to be honest with you, I would tend to suggest that you look at the results as opposed to the check marks and X's because there's a lot of debate on that. To me, what we told people is what we were going to deliver on, what we're going to do, and in most instances you will see that we have done what we said we were going to do. We've had 1 or 2 unsuccessful wells, and that's still, as far as I'm concerned, we did what we said we were going to do, and that's part of the business of exploration. There are a couple of X's which are due more to regions where we are unable to control certain things, where there's either politics or some partner issues that don't allow us to move at the pace that we would like to. And I think that's the one conclusion I want to draw out of this slide for you, both for us in terms of management and for you in terms of how you look at us. If we go into regions where we are able to operate, control, and where we have a political situation that encourages us, we move very quickly. We get things done. And I think the best example of that is Kurdistan. I think in Kurdistan, if you were to ask, and the KRG tells us, we are one of the best operators, if not the best in the region in terms of getting things done, getting them done quickly and correctly and efficiently. And it certainly is what we look to do, is to find those places where we are encouraged and move forward quickly. My last slide at the moment, just to give you a quick snapshot of the outlook and what you should be getting excited about on 2014. So first and foremost, our top priority in 2014 is Demerdag, is getting that field further appraised and to production. And as soon as we get to initial production, we start thinking about much bigger production. And Henry will give you a feeling as to where and how we're going with that. We've made discoveries during 2013, and we look forward to appraising them. Obviously, the Kurdish ones fit into the whole production profile and the whole story of moving to production in later years. And the Congo one is an important one to finding out what we've got there. And we've got 3 very important wells that we're looking at in 2014. Banan, which is well underway, well close to TD, and which we'll be testing into the new year. And that's one we're extremely excited about and hopeful about. And then in the second half of the year, wells coming in the offshores of both AGC and Haute-Mer, Congo, Brazzaville, Haute-Mer B. So that gives us hopefully quite a bit of sizzle and excitement in 2014 while we've got all those other activities underway. We'd put down here longer-term exploration. Some of the things we haven't been able to advance as quickly as we'd like are Was It in Nigeria, but both of them are assets that we are excited about. We will be patient. We will work through issues where we can and get ourselves ready to go. It is still things that we are working on making happen, and we certainly hope they will get going in 2014. Finally, as I said, just a word on potential acquisitions. We are out in the market. We are regular followers of activities in the regions we are in particular. As we've often said to people, we look to add on to the existing regions we are in. We think we're in very good regions, and we look for more assets. There are some small add-ons that we're working on at the moment and hope that they will come to fruition in 2014. We've used the word transformative here. There's some other things, and one of the places people talk about a lot is Nigeria, and we are active Nigeria players and followers. We do go into a lot of those processes and look carefully at that. Look at those potential acquisitions. I tell everyone internally we will do a deal in Nigeria. It's really just a question of when and how we can get them done. They are, at the moment, it's a very pricey area. We're finding that we can't find acquisitions at the price that we're willing to pay. But as I say, we will go back into Nigeria at some time in the future and hopefully pick up some of those assets that are coming primarily out of the majors at the moment. That's it for me at the moment. I obviously will be around for questions near the end, but I will, if there's no questions at the moment, I'll hand it over to Henry to take you through Iraq. All right, Henry.
All right, thanks, Mike. Hello, everybody. As Mike said, you're going to listen to me for the rest of the morning and part of the afternoon, and mostly what we're going to talk about is the technical, operational sort of update. We'll start with the Iraq operations. Here we have a map of all of Iraq, and on the map we can see we have the two operations or assets we have in Iraq, one up in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, the Hawler Block, and we have a provincial deal with the Wazit provincial government, and this is down in the federal Iraq. I think we're going to hear a bit more during lunch regarding the overall politics of the region, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. But I think it's safe to say that I think everybody's aware in the southern part of the country, in federal Iraq, we have seen a bit of a deterioration. I mean, we know that service companies at times have to declare force majeure. That some of the technical service contracts that the federal government has awarded have had some issues, and since the oversight, the pull-out of the military oversight, we've seen the security situation get worse as well. All these things have definitely impacted the level of work that a company can do in the southern part, and when we talk about Wazit, I'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, the opposite is what's going on in Kurdistan. I mean, there it's almost 180 degrees difference. There, what we're seeing is actually the level of activity is going up. We've seen a continued influx of majors coming in, and not. I mean, initially when we saw them start entering in the second half of last year, they were very quiet, keeping to themselves for the most part. And what we've seen through this year is that now they're starting to get out there. They're starting to talk to the other operators. They're starting to operate. So we're definitely seeing a change in that regard. As well, if you follow the regional news, there's been a recent announcement of the Turkey-Kurdistan energy agreement. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about this later on, but this has been a key milestone in what companies have been waiting for quite some time. The companies that are operating in Kurdistan, looking for a way to actually be able to export oil. And tied into that is also the recent announcement of the the construction of the Kramala-Fejkabor pipeline. And again, we'll spend a bit more time talking about those. Now, the hauler block. We'll start with this, and Mike made the comment earlier regarding hauler and it being a key focus area for us today, primarily the Demerdag structure. Now, so this is the hauler block. It's a large block. The city of Erbil is actually on the block itself, and we have 4 structures: the Zegara, Demerdag, Banan, and Ain al-Safra. Demerdag is the well that we had drilled and tested at the beginning of 2013, and this is where we have the reserves as a company are associated with this asset, and we are making progress on this, and I'll speak a bit to that as well. The block, we have 65%, the Kurdistan Regional Government 20%, and the Korean National Oil Company has 15%. What I'll do in talking through this, I will go through and talk a bit about the appraisal and the development that we're doing in Demerdag, Ain al-Safra and Zegara, the 2 exploration wells that we've recently drilled, the Banan exploration well, as Mike said, it's coming to an end, and then we'll talk a little bit about the facilities, evacuation options, and a couple slides on our corporate social responsibility and safety. But while we do have this map up here, I'll just, besides our structures that we have on the block, I want to, because I might reference a couple other things, so I'll just point them out now. This is the Kramala Dome. It's the most northern dome of the Kirkuk oil field. It's also part of one of the Kurdistan awarded PSCs. It's actually operated by the Car Group, which is a local indigenous company, and they are producing there. They also have, the Car Group has a refinery, which is actually on our block, right in the southern part of it. And the Car Group are the ones that have done this pipeline. And on here you can see the pipeline is the green line going through our block. The other thing just to point out here is our neighbors to the north. I mean, we have operators like Chevron, Exxon's up there, and directly to the north we have 3 discovered oil fields, the Bastora, Benanan, and Badarash fields. So like I said, I'm during the talk I might make reference to those, so I just wanted to point them out so you could see where they were. So talking about Demerdag, as we said, this is the asset that we have actual reserves booked. You can see these are the 100% interest numbers. Reserves, 250 million barrels of 2P, and then another almost the same in contingent resources as well. It's good to point out a couple things here. Here's just a cartoon, a schematic of a cross-section. Now, our well was Demerdag 2. Demerdag 1, this was a well that was drilled in the 60s by the Iraqi oil company. It didn't go as deep. It didn't have proper data collected in it. I mean, there were a lot of references of hydrocarbons being noted along the way. They were referenced to light oil, heavy oil, gas, but there was no real data. They never flowed it. We didn't have pressure information or anything. So we Demerdag 2, we drilled. We actually drilled down deeper and did a proper evaluation testing, and this is how we came about to these results. It was through the data of this well. If we look at the cross section, we have the most of the reserves, or all of the reserves, are in the Cretaceous section, and then contingent resources also in the Cretaceous, and then some here. This lighter green is in the Jurassic. That's part of the contingent resources here. Also, we have some prospective resources, and that's in the lower Jurassic and in the Triassic. Since this was all done, we have spent a lot more time looking at this, and what we've actually been able to determine is that we really didn't drill that far into the Triassic. We actually just barely penetrated the top of it. So, I mean, this is something we definitely still need to evaluate. Whoops, sorry about that. Now, here just Netherlands Sewell is our reserves auditors. They tend to be a conservative company. The way that they view this, the reserves are associated with the well, and as you go away from the well, the oil it's put into contingent resources. So one of the ways you move from contingent resources into proved is by drilling up more wells. The other things that affect it are recovery factors. So one of these, the first one is just, again, by drilling wells. These second two bullets are addressed by actual dynamic information. And that's why one of the key aspects of our appraisal program isn't just drilling wells, but doing an extended well test, or what we're referring to as an early production facility. This will give us the sort of dynamic information that will help us answer these questions in terms of recovery, so we can move additional contingent resources into reserves. The appraisal program has been submitted and approved by the government. It includes 3 wells, comprehensive data acquisition, like I said, this extended well test or early production facility for the dynamic data, and also additional 3D. I'll talk a little bit more detail on each of these points. Now here's the 3 wells that we're talking about. Here's the original Demerdag 1 well, the Demerdag 2 well across this fault. We have these 3 appraisal wells. We're moving back across the fault to Demerdag 3, as well as this is the most crestal part of the structure. So we're moving up higher on the structure, and we're drilling. The Demerdag 3 will be a deep well again. So it's going to the Triassic. So it'll test it. It'll do the same sort of sequencing that the Demerdag 2 well drilled. Now, Demerdag 4 and 5, these 2 wells, these are designed to be shallower wells. These are going to be Cretaceous. And the point of this is Demerdag 4 is, again, on this other side of the fault, and is moving down dip in order to test our free water level, or oil, or OWC, oil water contact. What we have from the drilling, we actually had an oil down to. We didn't, in the Cretaceous, we didn't see the fluid contact. So by hopefully going down deeper in the structure, we'll be able to pick that up. So we'll be able to delineate the height of the column. The other thing, and one of the things that for those that have listened to us before, we were never quite sure whether this structure and the Banan structure were related, we know they're related, but are they connected? There's a series of these relay faults in between the two, so we really didn't understand how these faults would be affecting flow, if at all. So here's the Banan exploration well where it's being drilled. So Demerdag 5, this is in the saddle between the 2 structures. So one of the key things that it's meant to do is to help us understand that the structural relationship here. I'm going to go back because I'm going to point out a couple other things here while we have this schematic. We talked about the resources and reserves. Now there's two units here, the Pelaspi and the Najma, which are both dolomitic limestones, very high porosity, and but as you see, they're not green, they're neither light green or dark green. Right now, we're not carrying any sort of numbers in terms of contingent resources, prospective resources in either of these, and I'll talk about that in a bit later as well. Here are just a couple seismic lines. Here's the map. This shows you how the seismic lines are going across the structure. We see Demerdag 3, again, up on the crest, and it's towards the crest, not just of the shallower, but even going all the way down through the Jurassic. So it'll be an interesting well to see. And like I said, we're going to go all the way down into the Triassic there. Demerdag 5, the well that's in the saddle. Here at this point, you see the difference. I mean, in 3, you see how big the structure really looks. Once we start getting out to the saddle, the bump is actually quite small. But there's a lot going on in here in terms of the faulting. So this will be an interesting well in order to help us understand what's happening. And it'll probably, I'm going to predict that it's going to be quite challenging to drill as well. Just because of all the faults means you have a lot of fractures, which means you have a lot of losses. Now, a little bit more on Demerdag 3. Like we said, this is it's a deep well. It will. It's designed to go, like I said, to go to the Curachine and hopefully properly appraise it. Like I said earlier, we don't think we really did that in Demerdag 2. We will be doing a comprehensive data acquisition and testing. Currently, we're actually right at the top of the Sharonish, which I guess it's right in here. And we're running a core assembly today. So part of the, besides logs and all that other kind of data, part of what we're doing is running a core there. Now the one thing is, like it says here, that the drilling experience to date has been consistent to what we've been seeing in Demerdag 2. I mean, we haven't, in terms of thicknesses of the formations. The one thing that in Demerdag 2 and in Demerdag 3, as we went through the Pulaski, this was that shallow section, we encountered hydrocarbons in both wells. Now, the problem, and actually I'll just go ahead and say it, we've also encountered hydrocarbons in Zagara and in Ain al-Safra. So in every one of our wells, as we drill through the Pulaski, we've encountered hydrocarbons. We've encountered gas, very biodegraded oil, and in Banan, and in this well, it looks like maybe even lighter oil. The problem is that with these deep wells, the size of the hole, when you're up shallower, doesn't allow you to get very good data. And then because you have a couple casing strings, we can't actually test it either. So in these deep exploration wells, we haven't really, all we know is what we've seen while we're drilling. So we haven't been able to put a lot of attention on that. Now, DD4 and 5, like I said, they're shallower. So that upper part of the hole is smaller, 13 3/8. So in these two wells, I mean, they're obviously primarily focused on the Cretaceous, but they will allow us also to come back and start getting a lot better data on the Pulaski. So again, just here's some of the types of data that we, besides the logs and cores, running DSTs, MDTs. This is something that's relatively new. We've been running MDTs on our wells, and the interesting thing here is that most times people think, well, what's the big deal in MDT? I mean, it's a pressure tool. It's just one of the logging tools. You're running down the hole and you're collecting pressure information, which allows you to then make your plots, and you can calculate your gradients. So you can look at where it might be wet, where the oil, and you can actually draw a line where the oil-water contact is. The thing about MDTs is you need porosity. And in fractured carbonates, it's almost impossible to do. And we've actually been the first company that has been able to run an MDT in Kurdistan. So, I mean, you know, people have been operating there for the last 6 years or whatever. No one's been able to do it since we have. And this is a very important message because it has nothing to do with our ability or the service company's ability. It has to do with our formations. We actually have matrix porosity. Typically in Kurdistan, they're very tight, very little matrix porosity. In our block, on our structures, I think part of it is because it's a bit farther to the south. We're seeing a facies change in these rocks, and we're seeing a lot more matrix porosity. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And then the other thing that's very important is, from a dynamic sense, is that this interference testing and production monitoring. So as we drill wells, we keep gauges down in the bottom hole gauges that run down all the way in the bottom. And as we put another well on and we test that well, or when we start producing that well, we start seeing the behavior from a pressure perspective in the other wells. And that starts giving us the sort of information in terms of what sort of fractures do we have? How connected are the fractures? Are we getting support from the aquifer? You know, there are a lot of very important pieces of information that will help us. Like when we showed the first slide, talking about how are we going to get these contingent resources over to reserves, it's this sort of data that allows an auditing firm like Netherlands Sewell to be able to do that. So this is all part of our plan. It's all, you know, in what we're doing. Now, he said also seismic. Here's the outline of our block. These kind of grayish lines are the original 2D seismic. In blue, in this area here, is some new 2D seismic. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But the rectangle that you have here, this is our proposed 3D seismic that we're going to do next year. Here's the Zegara wells. Ain al-Safra up there, but you see the Demerdag and the Banan. So like it says here, if Banan results are positive, the 3D will include it. Based on what we're seeing, we're pretty sure that it will be positive, so we're already starting to plan accordingly. It's a large 3D seismic, 430 square kilometers, and we're actually going through the tendering process right now, and we'll be looking at mid-2014 to actually start to shoot. Probably in April or so, we'll start setting up all the base logistics for it. And as soon as the crops are harvested in June, is when we'll start rolling with the trucks to collect the data. All right, so now I'm gonna switch gears to Zegara. Now again, this is the structure to the south. Like I said earlier, here we have the Kermala Dome, the northernmost dome of the Kirkuk field, and the Zegara is just pretty much the northern extension of it. It's the nose of the Kirkuk field. It's relatively close to Demerdag, so it's a easy tie-in. It also had an old well that was drilled. It was originally also drilled in the original hole, which was very shallow, was drilled in the 60s, and then it was re-entered in 1991. Netherlands Sewell had their estimates, 23 million barrels. I mean, quite small. And this primarily was, again, because of using a lower matrix porosity, and also the aerial extent of the structure was, we really didn't have any idea what it was going to look like. So the aerial extent of the structure that was used is quite small. Now, we've drilled a well, and we've learned some things about it. And one is that it definitely, because the oil column's a lot thicker, what we believe is that the aerial extent of the structure is bigger than what we thought. So that's definitely an upside there. We announced the discovery in December. and I think we posted the flow rates and the 35, 36 API oil, but I'll talk a bit more about that. Here's the drilling profile. The red is the actual, the blue was the projected or the prognosed. You see, we ended up finishing a couple weeks ahead of schedule. Because of that, it was a bit cheaper. We had oil shows in the Cretaceous, but primarily in the upper Jurassic. Again, this well, this was that first successful MDT. It was a big surprise to everybody that we were actually able to run it and run it quite well. In going through the well where we had the oil shows in the Dia, the Moose, as we were drilling, the Najma, we were a lot of oil shows, and then in the Cretaceous. So I'll speak a little bit more about the Cretaceous here. This is again. When we here we have the Sharonish, Cometon, and the Kamchuga, and this is a classic Cretaceous section that all the operators in Kurdistan discuss. Typically, the Sharonish is a very tight limestone, fractured. You go into the Cometon, is typically also limestone but can be dolomitic, and then you go into the Kamchuga and you have the dolomite. And like I said, when we were in ours, we actually have up to 25%. And I'm not just talking about spikes. I'm actually talking about thick intervals of 25%. I mean, if you look on a log and you look at the spikes, I'll have spikes going beyond 25%, but it's just a spike. So we have very good porosity. And when I said we ran the MDT, and we actually were able to log the free water level, the contact. From this, then, we picked the zones that we wanted to perf. So we wanted to stay a bit above the water. I don't know if you can read this, but this from here to here, it's 81 meters. From here up through the fractured, it's 106 meters. Now, from the results, the Moose, the two tests down in the lower Jurassic, in the Moose and the Dia, they were inconclusive. What happened here was when you shut it in, you'd have this very nice pressure build up, but as soon as you opened it up, the pressure just bled off. We didn't produce water, and we didn't produce oil to surface. With each of these, when we went back in at the end of the test, when we had to go in and run cement, the tubing was actually filling up with oil. So oil was coming in from the reservoir, but very slow, low pressure. The interpretation is from here is that at the wellbore, we just weren't connecting to fractures. I mean, that's our interpretation. Again, this is the sort of thing that will be key in an appraisal well, especially if we can plan or target an appraisal well in an area that we think might be a bit more fractured. The Najma, now in Demerdag 2, this is a very thick column, 700 to 750 meters, full of oil. And in Demerdag 2, like I showed in that first schematic, we aren't carrying anything in contingent prospective resources reserves for the Najma. In Demerdag 2, we used submersible pumps, and it tested. It's a heavy oil, 11 API, but we flowed with a pump several hundred barrels a day. Now, when we went on to test in Zeg, we decided, well, let's try and see what happens without a pump. So what we ended up happening, same sort of oil. flowing to slugging to surface. So the oil was coming out in slugs, which this is, it's very interesting because most people say, well, 11 API, you'll never be able to do anything with it. But here we've seen one well where with a pump we can flow, and at surface it flows. And now even without a pump, you can get it to surface. So we think that if we would have used a pump here, we probably would have had the same sort of flow rates. This nausea, and this is the same sort of thing that we saw also in Ain al-Safra. So we have this very thick Najma sequence with heavy oil that currently we don't have anywhere in the books, but we do have an asphalt on our block. We actually have 2 refineries that other people operate, and we also have an asphalt plant on our block. One of the things that we're thinking about is there something that we could do with this heavy oil? Obviously it's not something that we're going to do today, but maybe in the near future we might start looking at some options for that. And the last sequence is the Cretaceous sequence. Again, at very good rates, 400 to 800 barrels a day, and that is corrected for the shrinkage factor. It's very good, 35 to 36 API oil. And this just a slide just going through the test. And what we see here in blue is the wellhead pressure, and then in the light blue up on top, this is from the bottom hole pressure. And what we see here is in this, and then even at the surface is very flat, stable pressures. Now, what we're doing here in the black line, this is the choke, so you can see we're flowing at we have it open at here it's open at an inch, 64, and then we shut it in and then open it up, and we're varying the chokes, but it's a very consistent flow, very stable, which is very good. Now, and this whole period lasted, I think it was 3.5, 4 days. So over this 4 days of flowing as well, it flowed at a very stable pressure, at different chokes. The reason we did that actually was because of this number right here, the BS and W. At first, when it started producing, we were thinking, well, okay, the well was cleaning up, and it was. But then we saw the water composition was changing. It actually became the composition of the formation water. So we just wanted to keep on flowing to see what would happen to the water, and try to understand, okay, where's this water coming from? When we did that, we also ran a cement bond log, and what it showed was that we actually had no cement behind the pipe. So, here just sorry, excuse me for doing this, but if we go here, where we had actually we perfed, we had set a packer, and we thought we had cement all behind here. It turned out we didn't. There was no cement at all. When they ended up trying to put the cement in, the cement went off into the fractures. So our thinking is that we're actually, the water's coming up behind the pipe from down here. But yeah, so a couple other points is that this is, what we were looking at is this 81 meters of oil column, but above that, we also still have 106 meters of fractured Charonish that comes into play here. So, again, going back to those initial Netherland Sewell numbers, the numbers that they used were based on a smaller structure, not as big of an oil column, a lot less matrix porosity. So, there's a lot of work that's ongoing. There's work that needs to be done, through the appraisal drilling, but we're much more confident in doing something with this prospect. And here just we filed the notice of discovery. We in the next few weeks we're going to submit the appraisal plan. Like we said, this Pulaski, this is very important here. This upper zone where we know we've seen oil as we were drilling, but haven't been able to evaluate that either. And again, any oil that is in the Pulaski was not included in any sort of Netherland Sewell evaluation before either. I hear that the comment here is that, like I said earlier, this is something that is close enough that we could tie into Demerdag. So it doesn't need to be a standalone development. All right, Ain Safra. This is probably the most challenging and hardest to understand. It's a very large structure. It's very broad, fault bounded. So it's not the typical, like our other structures are all these very nice anticlines. They have faults, but the Ain Safra one is definitely different than most. So it's the hardest to understand. In our view, always the lower Jurassic and Triassic were the key reservoirs to produce or to go after. And this was just based on our understanding of the regional picture, with a secondary target being the Cretaceous. Netherland Sewell's estimates, it had quite a bit, 225 million barrels of prospective resources. And this was, though, about 2/3 of it was in the Cretaceous. So their view was almost flipped to what we thought. We thought we'd have a lot more in the deeper, and they had a lot more in the shallower. Again, we finished drilling this well earlier in the year, tested it, and we put out a notice of discovery in October. Here, this shows the structure. Like I said, it's a very broad anticline. Here, this is going. Here's the dark red line. Here is the line that's being depicted here in the seismic. You see the well going through series of faults here. Like I said, it's very broad, very big. I mean, several kilometers across, and not just, even down deep. It's actually quite broad. Typically, when you start getting in, a lot of people, the most of the structures in Kurdistan, when you start getting into the deeper formations, it ends up becoming a lot tighter. But here it's a lot broader. We have a lot more gross rock volume than is typical, especially down deep. Now, this well was a bit challenging for several reasons. We were experiencing a lot of losses and H2S. We spudded the well in June. The plan was to go down to the Triassic. As we were drilling, pretty much on prognosis, we entered the what we believe is the Triassic, and had a total loss situation. All the fluids were just instantly gone, and we ended up sticking the bottom hole assembly. We spent about 3 weeks trying to fish it out. After the 3 weeks, we got the okay from the government to just go ahead and stop, dump cement on it, and just cut it off. But during that entire 3 weeks, we were having H2S at surface. So the drillers ended up continuing to increase the mud weight, and this whole section that we had drilled in the Jurassic, where we were having a lot of oil shows, a lot of losses, had 3.5 weeks of just heavy mud going into it. Per the calculations, we put in over 4,000 barrels of heavy mud into the formation. So, and this, well, it'll, as I develop the story, this definitely affects the test results. Here, this was from the test in the Jurassic, but we identified the 3 zones in the lower Jurassic that we wanted to test. And again, this was based while we were drilling before we got stuck. We were having losses and oil on the shaker. So all 3 of these zones look very good while we were drilling. So that's why we picked them to test. Now, well, okay, before I start talking, so I'll just tell you, in regards to the Butma and the Daya, the results were the same as the same zones in Zagara. We didn't get water, we didn't get oil, we just weren't able to produce anything. So again, here we don't know. Either this means our interpretation again is the same, that we were, for the test, we weren't able to connect to any sort of fracture system. So again, this is all part of what we definitely need to appraise. But now going into the Moose and the Besalon, here's the test. This is the surface, the wellhead pressure. So when it went on, we perfed. Everything was running textbook. We did the acid soak. We started the cleanup. We were at almost right away. It was cleaning up at 100% oil. It was producing about 2,000 barrels of oil a day, light oil. And then things started changing. And the big change was here, when we have this break in the wellhead pressure. At this point, we shut it in to see what would happen in terms of the pressure. When we opened it back up, we had a huge slug of mud. Come into to surface. And it was about 95% mud. After that, it died back down. It started producing oil, and it started again oil with some mud, and this is pretty much the way it stayed throughout, with a series of large mud slugs as well. So this is what we were seeing on the surface. Not the best story. Here, I don't know if the glare, maybe this is a bit hard to read, but what we have here is in these green diamonds is the API, and in these ones, this is the H2S. So what we see at the beginning, we had this 2930 API oil and low H2S. As we were doing the test, what we started seeing was an increase in H2S and this decrease in API. And this continued throughout. Now, the thing that's happening here, because of the H2S, and this is actually very high, this 20% H2S, through this the whole time, the people doing all the work out here were fully masked up, right? They had all their equipment on, breathing apparatus. So all the work they were trying to do here the reality is it is a bit affected. And the way these measurements are done, they actually have to, look at a bubble in a glass, and they're looking through a mask. So, there's a bit of air. Obviously not this sort of air from here up to here, but there is air associated, maybe this sort of air. So that's, affecting the operation a bit. Now, like I said, we also have bottom hole gauges. So when we called it quits, and we were able to retrieve the bottom hole pressure, this is, so again here in the dark blues, the wellhead pressure, and here in the light blues, the bottom hole pressure. And what we're seeing is a very different character. whereas things were either stable or a slight decrease. Here at the surface, they're either increasing or at the same time it's decreasing at the surface. It's stable or increasing down at the bottom. By looking at the difference of the bottom hole versus the wellhead pressure, we can actually calculate the mud weight, or the weight, the density of the fluid within the column. And what we calculate is anywhere between 11.5 and a 12.5 mud weight that was filling up the column and this is the tubing. So what we have here is, like I said, we put in about 4,000 barrels of this heavy mud. This stuff was starting to come into the tubing, and it's so heavy, like I said, it's around 12.5 mud weight, that it couldn't lift itself. So the well was actually like I said, it was because of all this mud was coming in, it was just killing it. But you can see that it was trying. I mean, here you can just see the pressure increasing. Now, just to summarize, we said we did this the test. We do believe that it was affected by the incomplete cleanup. Now, it probably would have taken us about 3 to 4 weeks to fully clean this well up. And you're not going to do that with a rig on it because of the cost of the rig. So the plan will be, as part of what we're going to do is an appraisal plan, besides appraisal drilling, is where it will actually come back onto the well, complete it, and then we'll bring in like a small extended well test kit and actually let it clean up, maybe keep it out there for a couple months. Let the well clean up and see what it'll do. So that'll be part of the appraisal for this. And the other aspect is also the Triassic. That'll be key in the appraisal. We said since we got stuck on the way down, we weren't able to go to it. I don't know if all of you follow, but one of our neighbors to the north have just drilled a Triassic well with quite a bit of success, which is, again, kind of rejuvenated us in wanting to get down to the Triassic because they've just recently tested. So part of the plan here is to drill to the Triassic, and going back to the previous question is, do we drill to the Triassic, come back up into the Jurassic, and put a horizontal well into the Jurassic? Or do we end up doing two appraisals where one is try to get to the Triassic as cheap as possible, and we could actually go into our Einal Safra 1. We can actually go back into and sidetrack and do a horizontal from it. So we're looking at these options right now to better understand what's going on there. The one thing is that this is, I'll talk about the tie-ins when I'm talking about the facilities, but because of the distance from Demerdag, we do believe that this would have to be a standalone development. Not like the rest that could all tie in together, but this would have to be, you'd have to have enough oil that it can, on its own, justify the development. And based on everything that we think today, in terms of if we're correct in our interpretation of what happened during this test, if we look at the column, we look at the sorts of porosities that are associated with the rock here, we look at the size of the structure, and we run our economics. Even if we run our economics with a high H2S, because obviously if you have this high H2S, your facility is going to cost more. And for those that know our block, our PSC, you know that we have a couple contingent payments that we need to make depending on discovering an oil field. If we burden this discovery with the full contingent payment of $71 million, it's still economic. Now, the Banan exploration, this is the last structure. It's one of the larger. It's from what we thought, it was, again, just more of a typical anticline. We've now learned that that's not quite the case, but that's the way it had been shown. It's very close to Demerdag, just 8 kilometers, so it definitely, I mean, if it's successful, it's an easy tie-in. Netherlands Sul had associated almost 200 million barrels of unrisked prospective resources. But this number excludes the portion outside the original boundary area, and I'll talk about this on a later slide. I think it's easier to see. This well we spudded in mid-September, and we're looking at TDing in the very near future and doing the testing in the first quarter of next year. And so far, based on everything we're seeing, we were very encouraged. Again, here's just a seismic line that's transects across the structure. You can see the placement of the well. And again, I mean, a lot of faulting here. It's very hard to get away from the faults, but like we said, I mean, you try to place it so we're being a bit careful. And what we've done here also is, as we're going, we're drilling vertical, but as we knew we were getting closer to the fault, we actually started changing the angle of the well in order to stay away from the fault because we didn't want to cross it. Now here, this is some work that was done in terms of the surface geology. We had the seismic lines. The seismic lines went to the edge of the block. The edge of the block was defined by the Greater Zab River, which is this river here. And from what we saw in the seismic, it looked like our structure went off our block. We did a bunch of surface geology, mapped it out, and we showed, at least on the surface, that definitely the structure went over onto this other part of the, outside of our block. Per the PSC, if nobody has the land adjacent to you, if it hasn't been awarded, and you can show that the structure goes off your lease, you can ask to have that boundary extended. So we did, and the extension was given to the Zahir River. So here, I mean, you have the two rivers, they come down together down here, but they redrew the lease boundary here. So we were able to include, this on to our block. And again, in terms of the Netherlands Sul numbers, it went to the old boundary. It doesn't include anything that goes on in that area. Now here, in terms of how the well's drilling, we spudded in September. Again, it's drilling quite well. We haven't had any real problems. As we went through the Pelaspi, again, we saw indications of hydrocarbons in the Cretaceous. We're seeing high matrix porosities like we saw in Demerdag, oil on the shakers. We ran an MDT. And this is where the earlier question about the two structures, Demerdag and Banan. So when we ran the MDT, what it shows, I mean, like I said, in Demerdag we have an oil down tube. In the Cretaceous we didn't see the water, but in Banan, when we ran the MDT, we saw it, and it's higher than where it is in Demerdag. So what this shows is either these are truly separated through these series of faults, or they might still be connected, but in a very complicated way. So again, this is where this Demerdag 5, I think, will help us a lot. The 3D seismic will help us a lot to understand what's going on, between these two structures. Again, Upper Jurassic to the Najma, this 700 meters, looks like heavy oil, just like the others. We saw the oil the whole time we were drilling on the shakers. And then as we entered the Lower Jurassic, or drilling through the Lower Jurassic like the others, We had losses and oil on the shakers. We've now just started a few days ago drilling the 6-inch section into the Triassic. So that's where we are today. There's just some photos. Like I said, the Pulaski, we've seen oil in the Sharonish, the Comaton, oil on the shakers. When you have the cuttings and you look under a microscope, it's oil stained. In the core, we have we see the matrix porosity full of oil. You actually see some fractures in here that are oozing oil. So very similar to Demerdag. Now, like we said, we extended the area of the lease. We didn't have seismic coverage, so we went out and quickly shot some 2D lines, about 200 kilometers or so worth of seismic. We started in mid-September, finished in late October. No problems. It went extremely well. And the data is being processed now, but we do have the field-migrated lines in-house, and we're using those field-migrated lines to try to give us a better understanding. And here's an example. Now, the line is this bold, this is the green thick line. This is the seismic line that's coming up. Here's the Zab River and the Zahir, so it's going over this area. So here you see the structure, and there's the Banan well. So you can see that, like I said, where Netherlands Soul would have cut it off would have been, close to the river, which would have been about there. So what we have is another, 6 to 8 kilometers of structure that had never been included in any of the previous assessment. So this is, for us, like I said, the data is being processed. It is exciting in terms that there is something here that we'll be able to add. Here are just some more pictures as we're drilling through the Jurassic to get to the Triassic, constantly having oil on the shakers. And we plan on, we did actually do the sidewall cores. This is something that's relatively new also in Kurdistan. People haven't been doing that much of it. We've now done it on 2 of our wells, and we're getting some really good results. So these aren't the percussion types of sidewalls, but they're rotary. You go down and they actually, spin like a drill would into the rock and take samples. So instead of getting the traditional core, we're getting a lot more small pieces of core so we can get a better understanding or distribution of what the rock looks like. And as it says, once we TD, we'll be putting together a testing plan. And I think it'll probably see a very similar testing plan to what we had in the original Demerdag well. All right, so we'll switch gears here and go from subsurface to surface. So as part of our appraisal plan, we have this extended well test or early production facility that we're doing. And we have this conceptual field development. And it's more than just conceptual because, it is ongoing. So here's the city of Erbil. Here's the main road that goes outside. Here's Zab, or Zeg. The Demerdag wells, Banan, Ain al-Safra up here. And this green line that's coming up through here is the Kermala Feish Kabor pipeline that has recently been put in. Conceptually, the thinking is that Demerdag tie-in would tie into from the facility to the line. We have Zeg coming back to Banan to Demerdag. We have Ain al-Safra up here as a standalone. We're using submersible pumps for the shallower reservoirs, and this is important because it requires more energy, more power. Right now, currently, we have this Demerdag early production facility that we're putting in. The Carr Group is the company that put in the pipeline. We're doing tie-ins, Einal from Demerdag. And then we've started actually the conceptual scoping work on what the permanent production facility will look like. So this early production facility is a 40,000 a day facility, whereas the permanent production facility we're looking at 100,000 a day, and that's based on the numbers that we have today in 2P reserves. I mean, if those numbers start going up, obviously we're going to have to start reconsidering the scope of what that permanent production facility is going to look like. And then, future, things that we haven't really started in great earnest is the Banan appraisal and Banan tie-in. These things we need to start thinking about. Now, these next slides have a couple different schematics. The schematics are the same thing, but the schematics they just look different just to illustrate a little bit, the same thing in a different manner. But like I said, the early production is a 40,000 a day facility. It's comprised of 2 trains, and the reason we're doing this is most of it is geared towards the Cretaceous oil, which tends to be a little bit heavier and sweet, very little H2S or no H2S. The second train, the smaller train, is actually geared towards the Jurassic oil, which is a lighter, mid-30s, but has a higher concentration of H2S. It has, like I said, because of the submersible pumps, we will consume more power, so we will have our generators, to do our own generation for power. We'll be able to treat the gas, and we'll use the gas for fuel for the power generation. And initially, at the EPF site, we're looking at 15,000 barrels of oil storage. And the way it's set up, these are, it's a different aspects of where we have the different well pads, the camps, where the people are going to be staying, and the most of the facilities and the tank farm are going on the area where the original Demerdag 2 was drilled. The pad that they created for that well was huge. It was like a couple football pitches. So we have a lot of room already there that we can expand on. And then the other aspect is the truck loading station. Again, just a different way to show the same thing. This is the main road coming in, so Zeg, Banan, tying into the production facilities. We have the truck loading station, so it's closer to the road, so the trucks don't have to drive as far in. Like I said, we have a 15,000 a day storage initially at the EPF site, and then another 5,000 a day at the truck loading station. And like it shows here, and this is again the pipeline, the Carr pipeline, and as it goes through this part of the block, it's a 24-inch line. We have a 16-inch line that would tie in, and then we have a couple 5-inch lines that run from the EPF down to the truck loading station. Now this is tie-ins. So one of the things that this is the pipeline, the Carr pipeline. Like I said, through most of our block, it's a 24-inch line. When we started looking at how we were going to tie into this line, what we did is we made the decision, let's go ahead and buy the valves. We're not going to wait to see what the Carr Group is going to do, what the government is going to do. Let's be a bit proactive. We're going to go right out. We're going to buy the valves. We're going to have everything in country ready to go. So as soon as the line was put in, and people started talking about it, started getting a bit of press, and the decision was made at that point for the government. Okay, let's start looking at how people are going to tie in. So we were able to go. Hey, we already have the valves. So it worked out very well for us because these tie-ins are actually put where we would like them to be put. And this is key because there's not going to be tie-ins for every operator. Every operator doesn't get to say, I want to tie in here. So what's going to happen, I mean, we have 2 tie-ins on our block that other people will have to put lines to, put in their metering facilities, and share with us. But, for us, being proactive this way, we were actually be able to make it a lot easier for ourselves in terms of, the work we would have to do in the future. So both of these, the tie-ins for Demerdag and Alsafra are finished. And they've been, actually they've been tested, and oil has flowed through. I'm sure you've read that oil has gone from TAC through this line and has actually gone through our block, through the line, through these tie-ins. All this area has already been tested. Here, truck loading. Here's just a schematic of the truck loading station. Here, this is a road that we've put in. It's there's existing roads, but they go through villages. We don't want trucks going through villages, so we actually have put in our own road coming through here. And then this site is the truck loading station is initially designed for 10,000 a day, but it's very easily upgradable, and we have the land area that's ongoing that is we have a lot of room already there for expansion. The tanks, like I said, these 5,000. We have 4 of these 5,000 barrel storage tanks. The steel is already. It's probably, I'd say it's got to be about finished or almost finished being rolled in it's coming out of a mill in Turkey. If you were to go out to the civil, where the civil works are ongoing, you actually see that all the civil work, a lot of it has been done, and the areas where the tanks are going on, the cement has already been poured. I mean, there's a lot of work that's already been done in that. And this is a couple of pictures. They're a little bit dated. But this was this access road that we had to put in. This is the area for the truck loading station. Like I said, it's a huge area. It definitely gives us a lot of room for growth. We have 2 very experienced civil engineers working for us, and I don't know what school they went to, but whenever they do anything, whether it's our well pads or any site that we're doing, they try to take as big an area as they possibly can and work with that. Maybe it costs a little bit more money, but in the end, it's working out because like I said, it gives us room that we can play on work, put other facilities on the same areas. So where are we today? We, like I said, actually, the access road is about finished. The storage tanks are almost finished. Like I said, the platforms that they're going to be sitting on are done. In terms of the EPF itself, the HAZOP has been completed. The cause and effect, the heat mass balance calculations, all this stuff has been produced. The layouts have been finalized, and the procurement is underway. And the procurement primarily for a lot of the small stuff, but the main thing are these. This is the power generation, the export pumps, and the metering. Skids. All this stuff is, we had to start because it takes a bit longer to get this equipment, so that's all been done already. And like we said, the tie-ins for both of these are completed. So talking about export options. From what we understand today, just in the region itself, from a processing capacity, it's between 200 and 250,000 a day. And this varies depending of all different crude specs, from very heavy, like I said, asphalt, to the very light end crude like that comes from the TAC field. On our block, we have two refineries and an asphalt plant, which makes it very easy if we were wanting to sell into the local market. Typically, the local sales, now not for the asphalt, but for normal crude, is between 60 and 70 barrels, $60 and $70 a barrel. I mean, that's in the local sales. I think we're all familiar with an operator that has been trucking oil into Turkey, that has been going into the system, and from what we understand, they're being paid $75 a barrel, and the reason, is that this is net of transport. I mean, the trucking costs are quite high to take the oil across Kurdistan out into Turkey, whereas in the domestic sales, you're selling right at the custody transfer is pretty much at the truck loading stations, so you aren't burdened with any of the cost. It's just discounted because it's going into the local market. Now there's the two principal pipelines. The main one, the one that's been there for ages, the Iraqi Turkey pipeline, the ITP. It has the spine that goes down the Kirkuk oil field. So from Kermala, there's a line that goes all the way down to the Kirkuk tank farm. There it comes down to the south and then crosses Iraq. There's two lines, a 40-inch and a 46-inch line, and it goes into Faish Kabor at a large metering station that's monitored or run by the Northern Oil Company or SOMO. And these are federal entities. The other line that's been done, and this is the new one, this is the Kermala to Faish Kabor line, is this green one. And, well, this part is green. This is it coming from Tak Tak, going to the Kermala, coming through our block here. Now it's in gold, and it goes again to the Faish Kabor pipeline, or the Faish Kabor station. And I'll talk a little bit more, I think, about that in the next slide. This line, I think this first section here, I think, is maybe a 20-inch. Then as it goes through our block, it's 24-inch. Till right around, right in the northern part of our block, it actually telescopes again to 36-inch, and it goes across as a 36-inch line. The capacity of this line is 300,000 a day, and that's the way it is today. I mean, that can, if you add a couple pump stations onto this, you can increase the capacity. The thing is, it's a bit, pump stations have a long lead. So in order for them to put in the pipeline and the timetable they were looking, they weren't able to put the pump stations on at that time. Now, in terms of how this is going to be administered, who's going to be able to go in, to tie into it, how much are they going to be allocated into? None of that has been determined. This is all discussions that are ongoing today. What we do know is we know who can do what. We know the operators. We know what their capacity is. We know what their growth projection is because, we know what Tak Tak is doing. We know the facilities that they're adding to their existing facilities. If you add it all up, in the near term, you're not to 300,000. So, I mean, even with us coming on, you won't get to 300,000. A lot of work, a lot of these operators that are in here need to start doing a lot more work in order to start getting to the kind of numbers that you need to really fill this up. So I guess from our perspective, we don't see any real constraints in the near future. Now, the other thing that is being discussed is a second line. So there's been a lot of talk from the government and the Turkish government as well in putting a second line going across Kurdistan in anticipation that maybe eventually there will be constraints. And then there's also the discussions about a gas line. The thing for us, though, is, I mean, if you look at the Holler block, we're in a very good situation. Because if the oil does flow across Kurdistan to Turkey, I mean, obviously we're right there. The tie-ins are done. It's no problem at all. Now, if things don't go that direction, and maybe there is a deal between Erbil and Baghdad. This ends up being a line that can be used to flow in either direction. I mean, and this is one of the things that actually might press Baghdad into making an agreement with Erbil, because the ITP is under constant threat. It's being constantly blown up. There's sections of it that are totally corroded. They need to be replaced. So they have a lot of problems with the ITP. So if with this line going this way, they could actually take oil from Kirkuk and flow in that direction. So this line, I mean, it gives Baghdad a bit more flexibility as well. That said, if that were to ever happen, then you do have the issues of constraints. Or, I mean, if you really started putting the oil from Kirkuk through that line, that it's going to be filled almost instantaneously. So at that point, you definitely need the pump stations. You need to get that second line in sooner than later. Now, this is, I think, this is probably one of the last, what I've seen, published images of the pipeline. Now, what we have here, the red and green, that's the ITP, the 40 and the 46-inch lines coming through. Here, this is a Turkish border. And here's this Kermala-Feshkabur pipeline. The metering point that's run by the Iraqi oil company, or SOMO, is here. DNO, which has the Tawke field, which is out here, the lines, they have a 24-inch line that runs in. They have a metering facility, and then from that, there's a line that connects into the Iraqi oil company system into the pipelines, and it would flow out that way. I mean, that was done a few years ago, but it doesn't get much use. Now, the big question was exactly what was going to happen here. Were they going to bring this line and tie in to the existing metering station? Was it going to go and tie in somewhere downstream of it? Or were they actually going to go across here, across the border, and then tie in? I mean, that was always the big question. What was going to happen? Well, now we know. The line, it actually does go downstream of the metering station that exists and ties in. It's still on the Iraqi side of the border, but it's definitely well within the Kurdistan region of Iraq. It's this area is very much controlled by the KRG. It's so they made sure that their tie-in is in that area. And the other thing that's interesting is, and I mean, what they have is they have it coming up. I don't think the bend is quite like this. It's a bit more of a not 90 degree, but it's not quite as curved. They have a prover metering station that's gone in here. And then what they've also done is they've actually run a 24-inch line from here that parallels it down to the other metering, the metering, the DNO metering station. So what can happen, and they've run a line from this line to it. So they've put in like this L of a 24-inch line. There's with a pigging station and also a crude blending station. So what they've put in the flexibility where they actually will just go straight out downstream of the Baghdad control facilities and tie into here with a state-of-the-art fiscal metering station and then continue out. Or they could actually put some straight through this 24-inch line into theirs, or they could split it. So there's a tremendous amount of flexibility that's been built into here, depending on what sort of a final agreement is made between Ankara, Erbil, and Baghdad. So it's quite interesting, but it's definitely, things have moved to the point where, something potentially is going to happen pretty soon. Like Mike said, we have 3 rigs running. We have these 3 rigs, a 1,500, a 2,000, and a 1,000 horsepower rig. The smaller rig we're using primarily for the shallow wells and to run completions, so we don't have an expensive big rig to run completions. Here we have we'll finish the Banan. This is the testing. Then we'll go on to appraisal well, Demerdag 4. And then you notice in mid-year we have the Zeg and the Ain al-Safra 2. So the 2 appraisal wells of the other structures are going to be drilling in the middle of next year. We also we have the DDA appraisal. This is the Demerdag 3. This is the well that's going on now with the test. ROM 4, we have right now the small rig is running a completion on Demerdag 2, so that well will be ready to tie in as soon as the early production facility is ready. That should be done very soon, and then it'll move on to start this Demerdag B, or what is that? 4? No, that's So that's Demerdag 4, the down flank appraisal well. We have, like I said, starting mid-year, the 3D seismic, the EPF, the construction and getting it all going in the first part of the year. Obviously, then it'll be running. In the permanent production facility, like I said, we have started some of the scoping, but when this gets done and commissioned, the resources will start focusing a lot more, and chances are we'll have to start ordering our long leads towards the end of the year. And then we do have development drilling going on with 2 rigs. So this is, it's a lot of activity here. So just some final observations here. The Pulaski, we've seen on all structures potential. We just need to be able to go in with a smaller well, less diameter, to be able to go in and actually assess what we have there. But there's some good upside that hasn't been captured anywhere, not even in prospective resources. The Cretaceous, what we've seen is that we have better than expected matrix porosity in all the wells. 15 to 25%, some of the best matrix porosity seen across Kurdistan. Here also medium to light oils, low H2S. That's the other thing about that's different than most of Kurdistan. In the Cretaceous oils, the H2S is so low that it's actually considered sweet. And if you go in a lot of other parts of Kurdistan, that's not the case. In the Jurassic, here we have this Najma, 7 to 750 meters of heavy oil. Again, not captured anywhere in terms of resources, but if we can figure out something to do with it, this in itself is billions of barrels. Lighter oil, but it does have H2S, so that's something that we need to consider and think about how we're going to deal with that. And one of the things that we've seen is that this fracture network really does vary, and that's why this the appraisal, the 3D will definitely help us with that in Ain al-Safra, in Demerdag and Banan, but also the appraisal well will help. And then the Triassic, for the most part on our block, it's unexplored. This is definitely something we need to spend a little bit more time assessing. And just a couple slides on Wazit, just to wrap up Iraq. This is the province in the south. It's a very large province on the Iranian border. Here we have 40%. We're the operator, and we have 40%. 20% belongs to the Wazit provincial government, and 40% to our partners. Again, it is a provincial deal, so it's not a federal deal like the technical service contracts that have been awarded by Baghdad. This is directly with the provincial government. Wazit block, it's in a fairway of existing known oil fields, both to the north and the south. There are a couple fields that are, it's over 1 billion barrels of oil. These fields are being operated it's by CNPC, the Chinese National Petroleum Company, and Gazprom Neft, operating this field up on the Iranian border. There's a series of prospects. These are the prospects here. These are the Netherlands Sewell numbers that they associated with these prospects. In terms of the PSC, it's a PSC very similar to the 2007 vintage that were done by the Kurdistan Regional Government. When we signed the deal, we were hoping to go in and start doing things very quickly. I mean, this is sort of our mantra. We did. We went in. We opened an office in Koot. We set it up. Went out, started doing scouting. Figured out the areas we wanted to shoot seismic. Started scouting the lines, for a variety of aspects, including unexploded ordnance. We're doing all the work, and we're waiting for the permits to be able to actually shoot seismic. That was about the time of the provincial elections. What's happened since is, as all of Baghdad, all of Iraq, the governments are created by multiple parties, and the problem is when you have an election, some of the people stay and some of the people change, and now everybody needs to get to know each other again and feel comfortable in working forward without having somebody try to literally stab them in the back. So the thing is, this is all ongoing now. This whole thing of trying to establish this consensus, this coalition government. Because of that, in a sense, we've been put on hold. We can't get the permits to move forward. We still talk to the government. We talk to the people within the provincial council. We're constantly assured that we do have their support, but they still need to get this coalition all together. The plan for hopefully the second half of 2014, if we can, is to go in and start shooting seismic. And here's just a map, and this shows sort of the sequence that we're looking, starting off with this area here in the middle, where we know we have some existing structures that have been undrilled. So I think that's all I had on WASIT. All right, just a couple slides here. Well, more than a couple, but just a few. I'm not going to go through the numbers, but it does show, where we operate, we do try to do things to the highest standards. We do operate in very difficult environments, but we're constantly doing audits, training people, working on how to do things in a safe manner. If you were to look at the hours that we've putting in and the incidents that we have, industry wide, the numbers are quite good. If you compare it to the region we're working in, it's some of the best. So we're and it's something that we continue to strive for. You're just in terms of waste management, you're just a little graph showing the tonnage of scrap. Typically, what we do is with any wood scrap that we have, we give it all to the local villages. They use it for construction, for fuel, for whatever. Steel on the main road that comes out of Verville towards our structures. Before you get to that, so in between us and the town, there's a huge steel recycling plant. I mean, even a lot of the steel that came up after the conflict, from the south, we're going up there to be melted and dealt with. So the steel we take there to be recycled. Glass ends up going to a dump. And the ash, we have these state-of-the-art incinerators. These are about as green as they come. We can put almost anything through these, any sort of, even like sewage type waste, plastics, all sorts of stuff. We even, and the thing is, we don't use them to the full capacity, so we actually even allow the villages to bring their garbage, because there's not proper places for they don't have garbage pickup and things like that. So we incinerate a lot of that, and the ash. Actually, a lot of it ends up going into when we do reclamations. I mean, there's some. I know it's hard to see, but some before and after photos of the test pits, the water, the water pits, and obviously these are all lined. Everything is lined so we don't have seepage into the ground. But then once we're done with an operation, we go in. Everything is vacuumed out. And then we refill. Put in, topsoil, and if they want to farm it again, the land is perfectly clear. It's actually, they come in and test it, make sure that that's the case as well. Now, our community outreach program, I mean, for us, I think those that know us know that this is extremely important to us. I mean, one, just from an ethical standpoint, I mean, we feel an obligation to help people that could need help. But also, I mean, one of the things that we've learned in the places that we operate, whether it's here or West Africa, is that we have to be involved with the community. We have to be seen as a good neighbor. So one of the things that we do is these mobile clinic visits. We have on all our sites, we have highly trained paramedics. These are all individuals that have been around, they, combat experience. They have all the highest accreditation in terms of, being paramedics. And we have a Kurdish female doctor, actually two sisters. They're both doctors. They work in town in Erbil and a couple days a week join us. And they go out to the paramedics to the local villages around that. The stats that I'm showing here are as of October. So these are, since then we've actually added a couple more villages that we hadn't gone to before. But we reach out to the Mukhtar or the head of the village, and tell them what we plan on doing. Sometimes they tell us they'd rather not have us come. But the thing is, then what ends up happening is they hear from the other villages the success, how good it is, and then they actually come back to us and ask us, will you come and do the same for us? And one of the things just that stands out here are the number of children and women. Typically, in this society, the men will go from the village into town. I mean, if they have any sort of ailment or whatever, they'll go and they'll get themselves taken care of. But children and women don't have that sort of access. So our numbers, definitely are weighted towards them and the elderly as well. Also, we're quite involved with the schools. We've built one small school in a village. We've taken another school and redid the whole thing. Changed the structure, added to it. We employ a lot of local employment in our sites and social engagements. We typically every once in a while we'll host like a lunch or and invite people from a certain from a few villages. When we're getting ready to start an operation, whether it's a well or seismic, we'll invite people from the villages that are in that area. So like most recently for the 2D seismic that we ran, we invited, people from all the villages around. We had a big lunch, but also gave them the opportunity. We had some of the Vibra-sized trucks They were able to get in the trucks, things, the whole operation is explained to them, show them how we lay out the geophones, actually set off the trucks so they feel what the vibe, how the ground is being shaken. Because, they hear a lot of stories, right? They hear that, their water wells are going to be damaged, their houses are going to be crumbling down. So, we invite the people and show them. And, according to the ministry, we're one of the only companies that does this kind of stuff. But it definitely helps us. And, like I said, we went out, we shot a seismic survey, had no problems at all. Now, a big project that we're doing, and this is a bit out of the norm even for us, is the Kurdistan Children's Hospital. The hospital is in Erbil, or it's meant to be a pediatric hospital, and this is it's the desire, the hope is that it's going to be a state of the art for not just Kurdistan, not just Iraq, but even for people from Iran, from Syria, from the Turkish border area. That this is going to be a flagship hospital, for children, for women, for maternity issues, with all state-of-the-art equipment. Most of a lot of the lead doctors, surgeons are coming out of the West, and they will be working with local doctors and nursing staffs to try to also help build the capacity that they have there in the region. Our commitment initially was $40 million, and then AOG or Jean-Claude put in an additional $5 million. So $45 million from us that was supposed to go into the construction and maybe even to help to buy some of the equipment for the hospital. But once we started getting into it, we saw that there was also a need for us to do more than just give financial support. In terms of legal advice, we actually help set up the hospital foundation. It's an NGO, not-for-profit organization, registered in the UK. We in terms of engineering, we've put on not just some of our own engineers, but we brought in some external engineers to come in, do audits, get involved, go through the designs, and help out with just the whole construction of the hospital. Currently, Mike and I actually are on the board of the foundation. Also, the company, we've put in some financial controls in how things are done, and the recruiting is ongoing for the executive positions of the hospital, the medical and the support staff. It's all happening, and we've assisted in this a bit from a legal perspective and a human resource perspective, just to try to get things going for them. And just last week is, every December they have the huge oil and gas conference in Kurdistan. They give out 3, 4, 5 awards every year, different years.